Hi, I'm Nathan, and I'll be talking about innovation replacing blue-collar workers. Next slide, please. So in the past few decades, innovation has exploded, and although it sounds like a good thing, it has many negative aspects that can be overlooked by the public. Among the negative aspects of innovation, machines becoming superior to human workers is the most frightening. As stated in the Century Perception article in the stimulus material, quote, innovation will explode once ubiquitous sensor data becomes freely available. And due to innovation, machines can now outperform humans in the workplace. And soon, blue-collar workers, or anyone who does manual labor for a job, will become obsolete. Blue-collar workers are already being replaced, and this is projected to increase rapidly in the future. And as you can see by this graph, the 21st century was the turning point for these jobs, with a sharp decline in the number of jobs required to do the same amount of work. This could be devastating to millions, and possibly even billions of people around the world, who will be rendered unable to support themselves and their families with their jobs being lost. And my thesis was that innovation in technology will harm blue-collar workers because humans are becoming inferior to machines. Next slide, please. So my first claim is that robots are becoming superior to human workers in many ways. RobotWorks, an industry-leading robotics developing website, posted in an article that, quote, one robot arm assembling parts generally can do the work of 4 human workers. The 4 manual laborers, working 5 days a week and 52 weeks a year on one shift, would cost the company over $125,000, while the robot system only cost the initial payment of $50,000 and an annual salary of just over $16,000 a year, showing a drastic reduction in cost. And as you can see, this factory saved lots of money because the robot system outperformed its human counterpart for much less money. And many factories around the world have started to implement this kind of technology into their factories. And because there seem to be no downsides from the perspective of these large corporations, this will continue to happen at an increasing rate. So my second claim is that robots are replacing humans at an increasing rate. David Meyer, a well-known professor of robotics and neuroscience, gave some reference to how big this threat really is. He states that, quote, a new study by the McKinsey Global Institute estimates that between 400 million and 800 million of today's jobs will be automated by 2030. A loss in jobs this huge would be catastrophic, and it would be very hard for these individuals to find new jobs because their lack of education would deem them inadequate for most jobs. This would result in higher unemployment rates in those areas, and it would economically weaken communities who depend on these types of jobs. Which ties into my third claim. And my third claim is that the poverty gap will increase if these jobs are lost. The poverty gap describes the divide between the rich and the poor, with blue-collar jobs making up the majority of the middle to lower segments on the economic pyramid. Aaron Schulman, a Harvard graduate and globalist writer for Toffler, states that, quote, by 2020, it is estimated that 1% of the world's population will own 54% of the world's wealth. And this increased poverty gap will keep lower income families in an extreme state of poverty, and will make it almost impossible for them to move up the socioeconomic ladder. So as you can see, this is a huge problem that needs solutions. I will be presenting 2 today. Next slide. My first solution to the threat of robots replacing blue-collar jobs is by pressuring large corporations that are starting to implement machines into their factories to stop and preserve the workers they already employ. Now, this solution would mainly entail large-scale boycotts or protests. Next slide. So some of the pros to this solution include how people would definitely support a movement like this if they felt their jobs were being threatened. As Greg Satel, an economic writer for the Harvard Business Review, said, quote, an organization should empower its people, but only after it has done the heavy lifting of creating shared consciousness. The shared consciousness is that people's jobs are being threatened, and people will definitely get behind a movement like this where their problem is shared by many other people. It also wouldn't be too expensive to boycott or protest, and the only money spent would be to fund gatherings and get the word out. So the cons to this solution include how a protest or boycott does not guarantee any change from the company, and it would need to be on a massive scale for these large corporations to even want to listen. And by the time these protests gain enough numbers, it could be too late to save the blue-collar jobs that are already disappearing at a rapid rate. And the main implication of this solution is that if done on a large enough scale, large corporations would listen if their income was being lowered by any significant amount. And the limitation is that these large corporations have every right to employ whoever they want and to not feel inclined to listen to the public if they're not making a profit. Next slide. So my second proposed solution is to educate the public to which jobs are being threatened and how to choose a career path that can be sustained as machines replace human labor jobs. This solution could potentially be a big shift in school education because, as Sarah Marquardt, a writer and managing editor for Futurism, says, we should, quote, focus less on pure academics and more on creativity and presentation skills. She goes on to say that, quote, there will be a need for individuals who are able to create and program new technologies as these new technologies emerge in our society. Inventing new ways to solve problems, as well as creating technology to aid us, requires creativity. And therefore, creativity is the main advantage humans have over machines, and this is where the jobs are the safest. So, next slide. Some of the pros to this solution include how it would be very easy to convince people that this is an issue, similar to the first solution. And they would listen if a job they hope to have in the future is being threatened. Another pro to this solution is that it's preventative. And if more blue-collar jobs are to be lost in the future, we want to be proactive about our future careers. And a con to this solution is that if wrongly portrayed by the media or other sources, it could cause worrying or even panic among individuals whose jobs aren't actually threatened. And the main implication of this solution is that individuals would be able to choose a career path that won't be threatened by technology in the future. And the main limitation to this solution is that it won't save any existing blue-collar jobs, but rather prepare people or the next generation for blue-collar jobs to be replaced. Next slide. So, in conclusion, a combination of both of these solutions is necessary to save blue-collar workers and decrease the detrimental impacts of innovation for the future. The first solution is necessary to protect our current workers that we employ, and the second is to convince people to choose different career paths that won't be threatened in the future. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, I had a couple of questions for you, Nathan. What evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
All right, so the main pieces of evidence I didn't use that I did include in my paper was more like the specifics and logistical standpoint of how the technology is that much better, like moving parts inside a machine that make it so much more efficient. That isn't really relevant to the overall problem of it, and it doesn't really strengthen the argument.
Okay, terrific. And as a follow-up, what advice would you have for other researchers who are considering doing this topic?
I would say definitely to research your solutions before your argument. That way you know how to build it up. So my solution on educating the public, I came across that solution well into my research, but had I come across that in the beginning, it may have shaped my presentation to be a lot better. And for my first solution, I felt that if I researched a little bit earlier for that one as well, it would have helped me develop my argument and also help support that.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.